I mean, if you wait and you don't see this movie in the theater, I would say just don't bother. I mean, you're going to miss so much of the experience if you wait until it's out on Redbox or Netflix or, DVD or Blu-ray. I mean,
you take that cinematic experience away from this movie, and you have a pretty straightforward, I'm not going to say simple. I mean, there's some intelligence to this story, but it's pretty straightforward, and it's mostly, I'll be honest, I had a hard time relaxing in this movie. I felt like I was just it's just constant.
It was stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. To me, it was a little too much. It was exhausting. And, I feel like that at some point, you were just like, come on, give me a break. Especially at the end. I mean, there's some sequences that happen at the very end that it almost becomes humorous. The ordeal and the struggle that she must go through. Now, speaking of this ordeal and struggle, the movie does have a clear metaphor in it. And this is where my lack of faith of the audience comes into play. We saw this lack of faith in the audience in the movie we reviewed recently, Prisoners, and the audience was horrible. The audience was much better, I think, with this one, but I just got the feeling that they didn't get the subtle undertones of the metaphor that was displayed, even though, to me, it was in your face.
Oh, yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah, we're both, yeah. It was really in your face when, well, let's go ahead and say what the metaphor is.
Sure.
The metaphor is birth or rebirth of Sandra Bullock in this movie, right? She is...
Sandy.
Yeah, Sandy Bullock, who, if I didn't mention, very attractive in this movie, looked really good, hot. There is a scene where she is actually framed. She's in 0G, and she strips out of her, her astronaut suit, her spacewalk suit, and is wearing basically like she's going to a yoga class. She's wearing little boy shorts and a little tank top thing, and again look good. Definitely got ripped for this movie.
Taunt.
Yeah, very very well. Yeah, sinewy, if you would. Well, there's a point where she strips down, so she's not naked, but showing off her body a little bit. She's got a cord that looks like almost like a umbilical cord coming out of her, and she's floating in front of a window, and she's basically in the fetal position, floating in 0 Gs. And at that point, I went, Jesus, that's right. That's pretty in your face what this movie is supposed to be telling me, right?
Right. At this point, you're not really clear at the direction, and I feel like the audience may have gotten this part, but maybe didn't put the rest of it together.
Yeah, and after that point, I was kind of looking for it myself, and it was just kind of in your face that this is rebirth, and she went through, there's some backstory for her character that she lost a child, and maybe I kind of got the feel from her memory of that, talking about that with George Clooney, that she kind of cut herself off from the outside world, kind of really dove into her work. And she's a doctor. She's actually a medical doctor who had developed some kind of imaging enhancement that they were actually putting on the Hubble Space Telescope, which is why they were in space to begin with. Right. She was not a career astronaut. She had 6 months of training, and I kind of got the feeling like she did that. She didn't have anybody to lose. She wasn't leaving anyone behind.
She was no longer living. She was existing but not living.
Right.
And this story is her rebirth, the struggle, starting off with the only problem I have with the whole metaphor is maybe how it starts out, which is either like a violent rape by space debris, or possibly the space debris was sperm and the space shuttle was the egg. I don't know. This kind of part of the metaphor wasn't as clear, but it obviously this was the spurring on of the rest of the metaphor, that this was the catalyst.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff was very literal, and some of it was, obviously not quite as literal. But And the other thing, it's weird when you start thinking about the whole birth metaphor, you know, and I can see that there's a lot of there's a lot of lines tethering these astronauts together and stuff, umbilical cord type symbolism. But then, and here comes a big spoiler, George Clooney doesn't make it.
Right. So
is he just like, you know, is he the fetus who got aborted early or something? I mean...
yeah, kind of a rough way to look at it. I mean, we've mentioned rape and abortion in this.
Well, they actually say abort a few times in there. Of course, they're talking about aborting the mission, but still,
not necessarily George Clooney.
Yeah, but you know, he didn't. You know, he doesn't make it, and she did. So one fetus got there and one didn't. Apparently,
it's kind of that maybe like fratricide, the twin that I don't know. That's kind of a weird part of it. Let's just assume that you know it's just
let's just focus on Sandy Bullock and not George Clooney
and her hotness. Well, you know, I didn't. Here's another problem I had. You immediately, or at least I do, miss George Clooney's charm.
Yeah,
you know, and his character in general, because her character is kind of plain Jane. She does have emotional moments, and this is Sandra Bullock. Now, she does have an Academy Award for The Blind Side, but
not Demolition Man.
Well, I know that's what I saw that she had one win, and I thought it was Demolition Man, but I don't know. I
would have assumed it was. Demolition
she must have gotten snubbed. So, you know, but the thing is that she had to carry the rest of this movie basically on her own, except for one kind of scene where Clooney is part of a kind of a dream that she's having.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, when that first happened, I thought, okay, this is completely unrealistic, but man, it's going to be nice to have George Clooney back in this movie. Mm-hmm. And then once the scene got into it, was like, okay, this is not real, because yeah, she would not have survived him opening the...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, all right, George is back, you know, and I don't think we were meant to feel like that. I mean, I thought the dialogue throughout was fairly clunky and forced, not very strongly written for a movie of kind of this magnitude. I thought there was a lot of cheesiness and hokiness throughout. You know, I think Sandra Bullock did a good job. I don't necessarily know if it was a standout performance, since most of her acting involved just utter panic.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give the actors who worked on this a lot of credit for. I'm sure it was physically a tough shoot. You know, a lot of, you know, with all the zero-G stuff, and I'm sure a lot, you know, 99.9% of this was probably done in front of, you know, screens and not, you know, live action in some ways. But so I give a lot of respect for actors who do that and can pull that off, you know, because it's not a natural type of thing. But this was not, this is not like the actors in this movie are not going to get Academy Award nominations, I would not think. It's not something that they necessarily deserve for what they did on, you know, on screen.
And we did have Ed Harris in the movie still.
Yes.
Who's a very good actor, but he kind of phoned it in. And the only reason I'm saying that is because he could have actually phoned it in. You never see him during the entire thing. It's pretty much a radio speaker from NASA.
He does the voice of Mission Control, which reprising his role from, you know, as we mentioned earlier, from like movies like Apollo 13. Now, which was kind of funny because I didn't really realize it was Ed Harris until I saw the credits roll at the end. But I thought at the time, I was like, oh, it'd be neat if they had Ed Harris do this, because he did it in Apollo 13. Oh, guess what? Yeah. It was him. But yeah, I think he did literally phone it in, as you said.
Yeah.
But again, this is not a movie that's going to change your life. This is not a movie that is going to garner massive amounts of Oscar hype for its actors. I could see it for the director. I could see it for cinematography, special effects. I think it's probably going to run away with special effects.
Yeah, right? I would say give that Oscar to them right now. I don't think there's any question that visually this movie is probably not going to be beat this year. So hand that over to them. I also want to know if this was possibly Speed 3.
Maybe. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff about velocity and, you know.
Had that feel to it to me. Sandra Bullock, again, reprising her role. as kind of the person that has to make it through a tough situation. So it could have been Speed 3.
Well, if it had been Speed 3, and maybe it was originally pitched that way, perhaps instead of losing a child, she lost her, her hard-nosed cop husband or boyfriend, Jason Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
After Speed 2, we know what he's all about, right? And, maybe that's who she lost, and that's why,
You must maintain a constant speed of 35,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Going around there.
Well, yeah, that, and again, I just want to restate that even though her name is Ryan Stone, this was not affiliated with the Sylvester Stallone Dolly Parton.
As far as we know.
As far as we know.
We haven't found the evidence one way or another, as far as I'm concerned. I did a Google search for it. I did some Googling, and then I looked on the internet after that. That's a callback from a previous show last week. Anyway, I Googled it. I can't find any evidence that disputes that fact.
Right,
So,
and I Googled it on Bing, and I didn't find anything either. So, I don't know. We haven't, jury's still out. Jury's still out on that one.
If we find out, we'll let you know for sure. I would say, as far as survival movie goes, like I said, you take away the visuals, you have a run-of-the-mill survival. I think Castaway did a better job at simply a survival movie. Movies like The Road or Alive, or even the recent The Gray with Liam Neeson, and maybe even some cliffhanger. There was that cliffhanger moment during the movie.
There's actually quite a few cliffhanger type moments when losing grasp on tethers and handles and floating away, and that's probably a pretty good analogy, actually.
Did you get now the other feeling I got was that this was also kind of an homage to Stanley Kubrick as well, and 2001.
Oh yeah, well you really can't do like a realistic, space travel type stuff without calling back on that movie, because it was such a, vanguard of that type, that type of film. But yes, it does. Now it didn't use classical music the way Kubrick did to kind of show the rotating structures and and everything,
but kind of the existential.
But it
piece,
but it still, that was kind of the feeling it was going for, and it obviously has the advantage of having the technology that we have today compared to back then. But I think there was definitely. I'm going to go out and just kind of go out on a limb here and say that Cuarón is actually probably a pretty big fan of Kubrick, and
worst people to be a fan of.
Oh maybe the master of cinema in my opinion, but yeah, there's definitely some reminiscent of 2001 for sure.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it was too much for Bullock to handle on her own after Clooney was gone. I just feel like she's just not I think she's a strong enough actress, but you got to give her good lines.
I don't think, and I should just be clear that I'm saying that the actors aren't going to get Oscar nods on this, but not because they didn't handle their business. She did a good job with what she needed to do, and I'm sure it was a physically tough shoot to do, but there's just not a lot of lines in it, and a lot of it is her talking to herself, or her broadcasting to mission control when nobody can hear her and things like that. So there's only so much you can do with that. Plus, a lot of the dialogue is just, and I say dialogue, but a lot of it's monologue. Is her just doing astronaut speak,
right?
Counting down before she hits buttons and things like that.
Because I like to say a lot of astronaut shit.
Yeah, astro shit.
Things that Buzz Aldrin might enjoy.
Oh yeah,
as dialogue.
Yeah, Buzz Aldrin would probably like this movie.
Some things that also were maybe problems that were kind of technically wrong is that Bullock did not have what's called a SAFER, or a simplified aid for EVA rescue, and those are always worn on spacewalks, so she would have been able to do a little maneuvering in space. Typically, astronauts wear more than tank tops and yoga shorts under their spacesuits.
That's disappointing news.
Well, it would have been. I mean, if she had pulled that off and have been like a, because they usually have a bunch of kind of hoses and wires and things because, obviously it's climate controlled and they have a lot of things. She wasn't wearing a diaper, which they typically